Hold on to your thought for a while. Let me come back here to Mr. Abdullahi. Now, Mr. Abdullahi, something I picked up while Professor Okigbo was speaking of is about the qualification. So if you don't have the right qualification, how can such a person contribute to economic growth? Because that's what we're really talking about. It's not just all about learning. You have to be able to contribute to how the economy is going to grow in terms of, in fact, in all facets of life, because we have to have them in every sector of the economy.
It's interesting you asked me that. I thought you already knew the answer. Of course, I look at the level of unemployment that we have, running some 40 million people, mainly the youth. For me, as a resource manager, I look at the colossal waste of the lack of contribution that such unemployed people could have been making to the advancement of this great country. Some countries don't even have that as their entire population, and they're making a great impact. They're developing rapidly for the well-being and improvement of the lives of their people. And here we are with incompetent hands trying to raise those who are going to run the future of this country. I think Professor Okigbo hit the nail on the head. If you want to embark on any journey of improvement, you simply have to start by incentivizing those who are to make that system work. It isn't a charity. Harriet, it's interesting you speak about those who go into teaching half-heartedly, running out as soon as they have better opportunities. Let's be honest, there was a time when every graduate in this country, whether or not they studied engineering or philosophy or Arabic, wanted to be bankers. And why was that? A very attractive package, a prestigious job, highly respectable, and all the good things that come with that. There was job satisfaction. And now you have a teacher who for 3 months hasn't been paid a salary. Probably the wife is a teacher too. It's extremely demoralizing, and they have a family to bring up, and they're looking at a more secure future. What do you think is going to happen when there's a more reliable livelihood that comes their way in terms of careers? They're going to make that switch. So in very many respects, we're the architects of our own fate.
So now that, this think tank, the Nigerian Economic Summit group, has come up with this topic that they're going to be focusing on for the 20th Nigerian Economic Summit, what issues do you think they should really be addressing? Because they're going to have a lot of key players from the private sector, from government, from NGOs, from everywhere gathered in that hall, brainstorming on the best way to move the education sector forward, to ensure that we begin to play, even if not at par, but we should almost be nearly at par with other countries in terms of rating, in terms of competitiveness.
Okay. Holding summits is all well and good, but I must confess, it more or less trivializes the problem. That is, everybody gets together every once in a while to talk about it, and then goes back to their various little cubicles. What I would rather support is to have an emergency standing body, I don't want to use the word committee, that is looking at this problem every single day. This body is going to have within it people from the various stakeholders who are now coming for this summit that's going to just last a few days. Let's be honest, most of the problems are known. This emergency body should be looking at how to implement many of the good, long, outstanding ideas that have found their places only in shelves or cupboards of the various participants, but have never really seen the light of day. I must stress that it is not for a lack of ideas, a view shared by Professor Okigbo. I must confess it is the will to actually implement these policies. I'll give one more example. We all celebrated when we realized that education had the largest allocation in the national budget, followed by defense, of course. But for all our hue and cry and all our celebrations, it only amounted to about 9% of the budget. Yet, the recommended percentage that had been advised by multilateral bodies is that at this point, if we want to play the catch-up game, we should be aiming at something like 25%. 26%. It is a crisis, it's a big sacrifice, but we're investing in our future. Not too long ago, I revisited the subject matter of 2020. There's a third 20 added now.
Yeah.
And I had to soberly posit that we just wouldn't achieve it. Even if we had all the resources, material resources that is. And I received a lot of challenge there, but I had to be very blunt. I told them we just didn't have the people to implement it. Education is nothing a serious country jokes with. We really have to put our money where our mouth is. And pay attention to education. Summits are good, you win initiatives are good, but how many people are really impacted?
Professor Okigbo, let's get your thoughts on this as we try to wrap up this conversation. You're there in the diaspora. You've made a lot of points. You've actually pointed out a lot of things to us this morning. What are your thoughts as to what the participants should be discussing at the summit?
Again, I think I will reiterate what Mr. Abdullahi has just said. It is important for participants at the summit to take a little bit of time to revisit some of the content of our current system and the aspects of it, and ask sharpened questions about why some of the aspects of it are not being well implemented, and think about ways to bring it to bear fruit in our national development. But also, because it's an economic summit, and because we're going to be having a lot of private citizens, corporations, and heads of managerial heads of businesses participating in the summit, we need to open up a conversation also on how to bring in the private sector to be part of the educational process, which is the point I started raising earlier on. They cannot afford to stand by the side and expect the government to do everything. If the industrialists and businesses think they are in need of personnel who are well trained, they have to be part of it.
But then, Professor Okigbo, when that happens, don't you see a situation where education is going to become expensive? I remember I had a conversation with a professor some time ago, and then she says, if you think education is expensive, then try ignorance. Even at that, should we begin to look at a situation where possibly being educated is now going to go out of the reach of most who desire to be educated?
Well, I think the reason why anybody would think about private involvement, a private partnership in our educational system, is because we have a misguided understanding of what it means for private individuals and corporations to become involved in education. Right now, what everybody is doing is that you have some money, you jump into building a school, building a university, and private schools become money-making ventures, not necessarily a patriotic perspective to bring in, to contributing to national development. Look, I've taught here at private institutions. I taught at University of Notre Dame and Williams College and Harvard, and now at Colorado. In all these places, looking at the universities, for instance, research that are conducted here, 90% of them are funded by private individuals with endowments that are funded by private individuals and corporations. They are not necessarily all given by the government. And what helps to bring out, to train well-qualified individuals and personnel for the economy, and what makes these institutions very globally competitive is the quality of research that come out of these places. So sometimes I worry in Nigeria that we seem to have somewhat of a misguided sense of philanthropy and corporate social responsibility. Now, our wealthy citizens and corporate entities need to rethink what kinds of legacies we are actually creating in Nigeria of today and for the future. So, if you look at a school like Lagos Business School, I'm encouraged, however, some of the things that are happening there with regards to private investments in that place. But we need to see more of it, both in public institutions. Our institutions don't have endowments anymore. They have wrecked their endowments. We don't seem to even have oversights on how some of those endowments, got dried up, to the extent that, we can blame our professors and blame teachers and blame those as not doing enough. But again, you can't even be very productive as a scholar, as a researcher, as a research scientist in a tertiary institution if you don't have the kind of resources to carry out research. And if we have the resources for research, then those researches can be targeted at our own local peculiarities and how they impact our own national development before even we start thinking about where we position ourselves. In fact, my position is that if we get our acts together, if we get our footing together at home in terms of creating a sustainable development, then we will become automatically competitive on the global scale. We can't always be looking outside and expecting that we want to go out there and compete when things are not going well, very, very well at home for us.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Okigbo, for joining us this morning on the program. It's been an interesting conversation. I'm sure we're going to have this conversation again.
Thank you very much.
Well, I've been speaking with Austin Okigbo is a professor with the University of Colorado, Boulder, U.S.A. joined us via Skype, and the issue has been on education and how it can be revamped for national sustainable development. And also here with me in the studio, I'm also speaking to a human capital development expert, and he's the CEO of Talentscape Human Capital Management, Ibrahim Abdullahi. Mr. Abdullahi, always a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for this edition of the program. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Harriet Agbeni.